Why does a garden that looks full in midsummer suddenly have almost nothing ready to harvest only a few weeks later? Most gardeners blame the heat, insects, tired soil, or a lack of fertilizer. Sometimes those things matter, but the most common reason is often much simpler. Everything was planted at the same time, so everything begins finishing at the same time. Beans slow down together, herbs become woody together, quick greens mature together, and suddenly a bed that looked abundant feels empty. The solution is not to plant all 14 crops in one afternoon. That would create the same problem again. The solution is to plant in small waves, give every crop a specific job, and make sure one planting is already growing before the previous one disappears. In this video, we are building a continuous harvest plan with bush beans, radishes, baby carrots, beets, turnips, arugula, mustard greens, mizuna, tatsoi, dill, cilantro, basil, Swiss chard, and kale. Some of these crops move fast. Some stay in place and keep producing. Some use the last reliable warmth of summer. Others become more useful as temperatures begin to soften. The key is not treating them all the same. By the end, you will know which crops to sow in repeated small batches, which ones should replace tired summer plants, which fast crops can share temporary space with slower crops, and how to adjust the whole plan for a northern garden, a moderate climate, or a hot southern growing season. Stay with me, because near the end we will combine all 14 crops into one simple rotation for containers, raised beds, or a small backyard garden. Before choosing the first seed, look at your garden in 3 layers. The first layer is something ready to harvest now. The second layer is something growing next. The third layer is something just planted. If all 3 layers are present, the garden rarely falls completely silent. If only the first layer exists, the harvest may look impressive today, but there is nothing behind it. That 3-layer idea is the heart of succession planting. It is not about squeezing plants into every inch. It is not about producing more than your household can use. It is about spreading the harvest over time. Instead of sowing a full packet of radish seed, you sow a short row. Before that row is finished, another short row is already growing. Instead of waiting for a container of summer beans to become completely empty, you start kale, Swiss chard, tatsoi, or another cool season crop in a small nursery pot so it is ready when space opens. There are 3 basic ways to create that sequence. The first is repeated sowing of the same fast crop. Radishes, arugula, mizuna, mustard greens, dill, and cilantro can often be managed this way. The second is seasonal replacement. A warm season crop such as bush bean or basil uses the remaining warmth. Then a cooler season crop takes over. The third is temporary interplanting. A quick crop grows in space that a slower crop will need later. Radishes beside baby carrots are a classic example. The radishes are removed while the carrots are still small, leaving more room for the slower roots. The calendar matters, but the garden matters more. A printed date cannot feel the temperature of your soil. See whether your surface dries in 2 hours, or know whether your first frost usually arrives early or late. Use the date as a guide, then watch the plants. Read the days to maturity information on the seed packet, but remember that shortening days and cooling soil can slow growth. Give slower fall crops a reasonable buffer. In a short season area, favor crops that can be harvested young. In a hot area, protect delicate seedbeds and wait for a better temperature window when necessary. One more rule will prevent most failures. Never sow the next batch simply because the calendar says so if the previous batch has not established. If the first sowing struggled to germinate, repeating it into the same hot, dry conditions may only repeat the failure. Fix the seed bed first. Improve moisture at the surface. Add light temporary shade if needed. Then begin the next wave. The first 2 crops show both sides of this system. One uses the warmth that remains, while the other fills small gaps faster than almost anything else. Bush beans are the warm season bridge in this plan. They are not the right choice everywhere at the same moment, but where the weather remains reliably warm long enough, a small sowing can produce one more useful round before cool conditions arrive. The important word is small. Do not fill every available container with late bush beans. Use them in a limited space so you still have room for the cool season crops that follow. Start by checking how much warm weather is realistically left. Do not count only the number of days until frost. Beans also slow when nights cool and daylight decreases. In a northern garden with a short season, a very late sowing may remain healthy, but fail to produce a worthwhile crop. In a moderate climate, a compact and early variety may still fit. In a long, hot southern season, bush beans can remain part of the rotation much later, although extreme heat may temporarily reduce flowering and pod set. Think of the bean container as borrowed space. While the beans are growing, begin the crop that will replace them. A kale seedling, a Swiss chard seedling, a small cluster of tatsoi, or a tray of turnips can be started nearby. That way, you do not lose several weeks after the beans finish. For a small household, a modest group of bush beans is often more useful than one huge planting. A large planting tends to create a sudden flood of pods. Smaller plantings spread the work of picking, cooking, and preserving. Harvesting pods while they are tender also encourages the plants to keep producing as long as weather and plant health allow. In containers, choose a pot or grow bag with enough soil volume to stay evenly moist. Late summer containers can dry quickly, and moisture stress around flowering can reduce production. Water deeply enough to moisten the root zone, then let the upper surface begin to dry before watering again. Avoid repeatedly splashing the foliage late in the day, especially as nights become cooler and airflow decreases. Do not keep a declining bean plant simply because it is still green. Watch its performance. If new flowers have stopped, pod quality is falling, pests are increasing, and the season is moving away from warm weather, that plant may be occupying space that would serve a fall crop better. Succession gardening is partly the art of knowing when to move on. Now compare bush beans with radishes. Beans are a calculated warm season gamble. Radishes are the fast gap fillers. Radishes are useful because they can occupy a narrow strip, the edge of a raised bed, a shallow open space in a larger container, or the temporary gap between slower crops. But their speed can tempt gardeners into sowing too many. A full packet can turn into more radishes than one kitchen can use, all ready at almost the same moment. A practical starting rhythm is a short row every 1 to 2 weeks, adjusted for your weather and how quickly your household uses them. During very hot conditions, germination and root quality may suffer, so do not force the schedule. Wait for a cooler window, use light shade during the hottest part of the day, or move the container where it receives morning sun and afternoon protection. Radish seed needs consistent moisture near the soil surface. A deep watering, followed by several days of a dry crust, can create uneven germination. Keep the top layer gently moist until seedlings are established. Once the plants are growing, aim for steady moisture rather than alternating drought and saturation. Irregular moisture can reduce root quality. Spacing matters more than many beginners expect. When seedlings are crowded, they may produce leaves without forming good roots. Thin them early enough that the remaining plants can expand. Those small leaves can be used if they are clean and healthy. So thinning does not need to feel wasteful. Radishes also work well beside baby carrots. The radishes emerge quickly, mark the row, and are harvested before the carrots need their full space. This is not magic, and it does not remove the need for proper spacing, but it uses the early open space more efficiently. Harvest promptly when the roots reach the size expected for the variety. Leaving them too long in warm soil can lead to pithy texture, cracking, or harsh flavor. The goal is not to grow the largest possible radish. The goal is to keep a reliable sequence moving. Here is the first retention check for your own garden. Where do you have a space that will be free for only 3 or 4 weeks? That space may be too temporary for a large crop, but it can be valuable for radishes. And where do you still have enough warmth for a small group of bush beans? Those two answers immediately separate the warm bridge from the cool season gap filler. Radishes give speed, but speed alone cannot carry a garden into fall. The next 3 crops build the slower layer underneath that quick harvest. Baby carrots are the first slow layer. The name does not always mean a different species. It usually means a variety selected for shorter roots, a smaller harvest size, or a container-friendly habit. In a deep, raised bed, long carrots may work well, but in a balcony pot or grow bag, shorter types are easier to manage because they need less uninterrupted soil depth. Carrots are not ideal for constant transplanting. Sow them where they will finish. Their small seeds and delicate early roots make surface moisture the main challenge. Prepare a fine, loose seed bed without hard clods. Sow shallowly. Press the soil gently for seed contact and keep the top layer from drying out during germination. This is one crop where patience protects the succession plan. Do not assume a sowing has failed after only a few days. At the same time, do not leave the surface neglected. A thin cover that preserves moisture, a light board temporarily placed over the row and checked daily, or a breathable fabric can help, but it must be removed as soon as seedlings emerge so they receive light. Instead of sowing one wide block, divide the carrot space into 2 or 3 narrow sections. Sow the first section, then another later if conditions remain suitable. This does not guarantee identical harvest intervals because fall growth slows, but it reduces the chance that every carrot reaches harvest size at once. Radishes can share the early space, but keep the plan simple. Do not mix so densely that thinning becomes impossible. The radishes should leave before the carrots need room. If you wait too long, the fast crop becomes competition rather than a helper. Carrots also teach an important succession lesson. Not every harvest must wait for full size. In a shortening season, smaller, tender roots may be the practical goal. That is especially useful for container northern gardens. The crop can still be valuable even if it does not become a large storage carrot. Beets create a different kind of middle layer because they can provide both edible leaves and roots. That dual use makes them helpful in a succession garden, but only if harvested with restraint. Removing a small number of outer leaves from healthy plants can provide an early taste while the roots continue to develop. Stripping too many leaves weakens the plant and slows root growth. Beet seeds are naturally clustered structures, so more than one seedling may emerge from what appears to be one seed. Thin carefully to give each plant room. Crowded beets often create abundant foliage but undersized roots. If your main goal is baby beet greens, closer spacing can be intentional. If your goal is roots, wider final spacing matters. This is why the harvest goal should be decided before sowing. A bed for baby leaves is managed differently from a bed for mature roots. Succession planting becomes more accurate when each sowing has a purpose. One short row may be for young greens. A second row may be allowed to form roots. A third may be delayed to extend the harvest. Beets also fit well into containers because their foliage is attractive and upright. Use a container deep enough for the roots and broad enough to avoid severe crowding. Keep the soil evenly moist, but make sure excess water can drain. Heavy, waterlogged soil can reduce root quality and invite disease. Turnips are another dual-purpose crop, but their role changes with the variety and the weather. Some are grown mainly for greens, others are grown for roots. Some can serve both purposes. Again, decide what you want from the sowing. For baby turnip greens, a denser short row can provide an early harvest. For roots, thin the plants and give them time. As temperatures begin to cool, turnips often become more useful in the rotation, especially after warm season plants are removed. Turnips can follow bush beans in a raised bed, but do not assume the soil is ready the moment the beans come out. Remove old debris, check for compacted areas, refresh the surface with mature compost if needed, and water the bed before sowing if it is dry. Good seed-to-soil contact matters for the small seeds. A useful sowing rhythm for turnips is often a small batch every 2 weeks during a suitable weather window, but the final decision should follow temperature, available space, and your first expected frost. The last sowing in a northern garden may be intended for greens rather than full roots. In a warmer region, later sowings may have much more time. Now look at the 3 root crops together. Carrots are the patient background crop. Beets provide an early leaf option and a later root. Turnips can move quickly when conditions suit them and can replace declining summer plants. If all 3 are sown on the same day in one large block, they still create a harvest wave. If they are divided into smaller sections, they become a harvest sequence. Here is the space-saving question to ask before moving on. Which areas are open now, and which areas will open in 2 or 3 weeks? Sow the slow roots in the permanent spaces. Reserve the soon-to-be open spaces for turnips or another crop that can begin as soon as summer plants are removed. Root crops create the harvest that comes later, but the next group is what keeps the garden looking full and gives you something useful much sooner. Arugula is one of the easiest crops to understand and one of the easiest to miss time. It grows quickly in favorable conditions, and young leaves can be harvested early. But in persistent heat, plants may bolt rapidly, leaves may become stronger in flavor, and germination may be uneven. That does not mean arugula is impossible in late summer. It means location and timing matter. A container that receives morning sun and protection from harsh afternoon heat can perform better than an exposed black pot on a hot patio. In a raised bed, light shade from a taller crop can protect a small sowing, as long as the arugula still receives enough light and airflow. Sow a narrow band rather than a large patch. A new band every 10 to 14 days can be a useful starting pattern when temperatures are suitable. Harvest some leaves young. Then observe whether the plants remain productive. If the weather suddenly becomes hot again, the next sowing can wait. Arugula works best when you do not ask one planting to last forever. Treat it as a quick, flexible crop. It can fill the edge of a kale container while the kale is still small. It can follow radishes in a short row. It can occupy a space that will later be needed by a larger fall plant. Mustard greens provide more variety because cultivars differ in leaf shape, flavor, size, and heat response. Some are used mainly as baby leaves. Others form larger plants that can be harvested from the outside. The succession method depends on the goal. For baby leaves, sow a short, relatively close band and harvest young. For larger leaves, thin plants and allow more space. If you want several harvests, remove outer leaves and protect the central growing point. Do not cut every plant to the soil unless the variety and your harvest plan are designed for regrowth. Mustard greens can tolerate some heat, but they usually become more pleasant as temperatures moderate. Their stronger flavor in heat is not necessarily a failure. Some gardeners enjoy it. The important point is to know what kind of harvest you want. Use mustard greens to add resilience to the rotation. If arugula bolts quickly, mustard may continue. If turnips are being grown mainly for roots, mustard can supply more leaves. If kale is still too small to harvest, mustard can fill the gap. Mizuna is another fast leafy crop, but its fine, deeply cut leaves create a different texture and harvest pattern. It can be harvested young for salads or allowed to form a fuller plant. The open shape of the foliage makes it visually attractive in containers, but dense sowing can still reduce airflow near the soil. A small cluster at the edge of a large container can be useful while the central crop is young. As the larger crop expands, harvest the mizuna and free the space. This is temporary interplanting in its simplest form. For repeated sowing, use small patches. A 10 to 14 day interval is a reasonable starting point in suitable weather, but do not follow the interval blindly. If the first patch is growing slowly because of heat or low light, wait before adding another. If the first patch is developing quickly and your household uses it often, the next patch can begin sooner. Tatsoi completes this group, but it should not be treated as simply another version of mizuna. Tatsoi forms a low rosette and can occupy more horizontal space as it matures. It can be grown for baby leaves at closer spacing or for full rosettes at wider spacing. This is where the harvest goal again controls the schedule. Baby tatsoi can be part of a quick sowing. Full tatsoi belongs in a more permanent position. In very warm conditions, germination and quality may be less reliable. Waiting for a cooler window can be better than repeatedly sowing into stressful soil. Tatsoi can replace a finished basil plant or a declining bush bean when the weather begins to favor cool season growth. It can also be started in a small cell or nursery pot, then transplanted carefully when space opens. That gives the garden a head start without leaving a bed empty while you wait for germination. Now, pause and compare these 4 greens. Arugula is fast and peppery, Mustard offers a wide range of leaf types and can bridge hot and cool conditions. Mizuna fills edges and provides repeated light harvests. Tatsoi can begin as a baby green or mature into a substantial rosette. They look like one category, but they do not belong on one identical schedule. This is where many succession plans fail. Crops that look similar do not necessarily belong on the same planting schedule. The leafy crops handle much of the volume, but 3 herbs can make the rotation far more useful in the kitchen if they are not planted the same way. Dill is often sown as if one large planting will solve the entire season. Then every plant reaches the same stage, and the gardener has more dill than needed for a short period followed by none later. A better approach is a small sowing, followed by another small sowing after roughly 2 to 3 weeks if conditions remain favorable. Dill develops a taproot and generally prefers to grow where it is sown. Transplanting can work when seedlings are young and handled carefully, but direct sowing avoids unnecessary root disturbance. In containers, remember that some varieties become much taller than expected. Place them where they will not shade small greens. A narrow strip along the back of a bed can work, or use a separate pot that can be moved if it begins blocking light. Keep the seedbed evenly moist through germination. Once established, dill does not need constantly wet soil, but severe drying in a small pot can push it towards stress. Decide whether the goal is fresh leaves, flowers for beneficial insects, or seed. A leaf harvest requires repeated young plantings. A seed harvest requires allowing some plants to mature fully. These goals should not be confused. If every plant is allowed to flower, leaf production will not remain the same. Cilantro is even more sensitive to timing. Many gardeners sow it in intense heat, see weak germination or rapid bolting, and conclude that the seed was poor. Often, the real problem is temperature. As nights begin to cool, cilantro becomes more dependable. In a hot southern garden, that window may arrive later than the calendar suggests. In a northern garden, the window may arrive earlier, but be shorter. Watch the forecast and the soil, not only the month. For a household that uses cilantro regularly, several small pots are often easier than one large pot. Sow one, then start another around 2 weeks later when conditions are good. The first pot can be harvested while the second is developing. If a hot spell returns, pause the sequence instead of forcing another sowing. Cilantro seed can germinate more evenly when the seed clusters are gently split, but they do not need to be pulverized. Sow at the depth recommended on the packet and keep the surface consistently moist. Once plants are established, provide good light and airflow. Harvest outer stems or cut a portion while leaving enough growth for the plant to continue, but accept that cilantro is naturally short-lived in warm conditions. Succession planting works with that biology instead of trying to turn cilantro into a permanent plant. Basil belongs to the opposite temperature strategy. It uses the warmth that remains. If your nights are still comfortably warm and your frost date is distant, a small late basil planting or an existing healthy plant may continue providing leaves. If cold nights are close, starting more basil outdoors may not be worthwhile. The mistake is placing basil and cilantro on the same calendar. Basil wants warmth. Cilantro performs better as conditions cool. In a well-planned rotation, one hands the herb roll to the other. Keep harvesting basil regularly while it is active. Pinch or cut above a healthy pair of leaves so the plant can branch. Remove flower buds if leaf production is the priority, but do not strip the plant heavily during stress. A late summer basil plant still needs enough foliage to support growth. Use basil as temporary space. While it continues producing, start cilantro in a protected pot for the cooler period ahead. When basil finally slows, the cilantro can take over the herb harvest. Dill, cilantro, and basil reveal an important principle. Succession planting is not simply repeating a sowing every 14 days. It is matching each sowing to the plant's temperature preference, growth habit, and purpose in the kitchen. Here is another retention question. Which herb do you actually use every week? That answer should control the size of each sowing. There is no benefit in maintaining 3 waves of dill if your household rarely uses it. A succession plan should reduce waste, not create it. The final two crops are different. Instead of rotating quickly, they become the dependable backbone that stays in place while faster crops come and go around them. Swiss chard is one of the best backbone crops because it can remain useful through a wide range of conditions. It is not a crop you need to resow every 10 days. One healthy planting can supply outer leaves over an extended period. That changes how you place it. Give Swiss chard a permanent position with enough root space. In a container, choose a pot with good depth and enough soil volume to prevent rapid drying. In a raised bed, place it where it will not be crowded by crops that also need long-term space. Harvest from the outside. Remove the oldest usable leaves near the base without damaging the center. The central growing point produces the next leaves. If you cut into the crown or remove too much foliage at once, recovery slows. Young Swiss chard can share space temporarily. Radishes, arugula, or mizuna may grow near the edge while the chard is small. As the chard expands, harvest the temporary crop. This lets one container produce a quick early harvest and a longer later harvest without permanent crowding. Swiss chard also provides flexibility. If weather delays the roots, or if cilantro refuses to cooperate, the chard can still offer something useful. That reliability is why succession gardens need backbone crops. A rotation built only from quick crops can become unstable when one sowing fails. Kale serves a similar role but often becomes even more valuable as temperatures cool. It can be grown for baby leaves at closer spacing or as larger plants for repeated outer leaf harvests. Those are different systems. For baby kale, sow short bands and harvest young. For long-term kale, give each plant more space and protect the central growing point. Start seedlings before the final location is fully open if your season is short. A small nursery pot can hold the next crop while bush beans or basil finish. When transplanting, move seedlings before they become root-bound. Water the receiving bed first if it is dry, plant at the proper depth, and protect young plants from intense afternoon heat for the first few days if needed. A full crop can still suffer transplant stress during a late hot spell. Monitor caterpillars, aphids, and other pests. Younger fall brassicas can be damaged quickly. Check the undersides of leaves and the growing center. Physical barriers such as fine insect netting can help when installed before pests arrive. But the cover must be supported so it does not press heavily on the plants. Kale is not invincible, and cooler weather does not remove every problem. But it often gives the succession garden a stable late-season crop after tender warm-season plants decline. Together, Swiss chard and kale form the background layer. Around them, fast greens come and go. Root crops develop below. Herbs change with temperature. Bush beans use the remaining warmth. The entire rotation becomes more resilient because not every harvest depends on the same growth speed. This is also the point where many gardeners realize they do not need 14 separate large spaces. Several crops are temporary. Several can be harvested young. Several can occupy small containers. The backbone plants need permanent room, but the quick crops can move around them. Now that every crop has a job, we can solve the hardest part, deciding what to plant first, what to repeat, and what should wait for cooler conditions. No single national planting date can organize this garden. The United States includes short northern seasons, moderate regions with long autumns, high elevation gardens with sudden cold, and southern climates where summer heat can continue long after the calendar says fall. Begin with your local first expected frost date, but do not stop there. Count backward using the days to maturity range on the seed packet, then add extra time for shorter days and slower fall growth. The later the crop is planted, the more valuable that buffer becomes. In a short season northern garden, priority goes to crops that can be harvested young or mature quickly. Radishes, arugula, mizuna, mustard greens, baby turnip greens, baby kale, and young beet leaves may provide the most reliable early results. Bush beans and new basil plantings deserve caution if the remaining warm window is narrow. Northern gardeners can also start kale, Swiss chard, and tatsoi seedlings before space opens. This saves time. A crop does not need to wait as a packet of dry seed while the summer bed is still occupied. In a moderate climate, the full bridge becomes possible. A small bush bean sowing may still fit, while radishes and leafy greens begin in protected positions. Carrots, beets, and turnips can be divided into sections. Kale and Swiss chard can be established for longer harvests. Herbs can transition from basil to cilantro as temperatures change. In a hot southern climate, the problem may be the opposite. There may be plenty of growing time, but the soil can remain too hot for consistent cilantro, arugula, or tatsoi germination. Use morning sun, afternoon shade, light-colored containers, mulch around established plants, and careful surface watering for seed beds. Sometimes the correct decision is to wait for a better temperature window rather than wasting seed. Bush beans and basil may remain active longer in the south, but extreme heat can still reduce performance. More time does not always mean perfect conditions. Watch plant response. High elevation and inland gardens need special caution because warm days can be followed by cold nights. Protect young seedlings, keep a lightweight cover available, and avoid assuming that a warm afternoon represents the entire week. The seed packet remains useful, but read it correctly. Days to maturity may be counted from sowing for direct seeded crops or from transplanting for some transplanted crops. Conditions in your garden can make the real period shorter or longer. Use the number as planning information, not a guarantee. Also notice the difference between harvest stages. A kale plant for baby leaves may be useful well before a large kale plant. A turnip sowing for greens may succeed even when there is not enough time for full roots. A beet sowing can still provide leaves. A baby carrot can be harvested before reaching storage size. Flexible harvest goals protect the succession plan. The weather forecast should influence each wave. If several days of intense heat are arriving, delay tiny surface-sown seeds or provide temporary protection. If heavy rain is expected, make sure containers drain freely and seed is not washed into clumps. If a cold snap is approaching, prioritize established seedlings and use cover where appropriate. Moisture is the hidden clock. A seed cannot join the next layer if it never germinates. New sowings need more frequent attention than established plants because their roots are shallow. Check the surface at least once each day during hot, dry weather. Water gently enough that seed is not displaced. Labels are equally important. Write the crop, variety, and sowing date. Without labels, repeated sowings become guesses. The gardener may sow too soon, wait too long, or confuse a slow first batch with a newer batch. A notebook or simple phone note can record 4 things: what was planted, where it was planted, when it emerged, and when the first harvest began. After one season, your own records become more useful than a generic national calendar. In a moment, we will turn these climate adjustments into 2 complete planting models, one for containers and one for a raised bed. Start with the container model. Imagine 5 main growing spaces and 1 small nursery tray. Container 1 holds the warm bridge. That may be bush beans or an existing basil plant if the weather remains warm. Do not place both there automatically. Choose the crop that matches your conditions and kitchen needs. Container 2 holds the backbone. Swiss chard or kale grows here in a permanent position. While the plant is young, use the edge for a small sowing of radishes, arugula, or mizuna. Remove the fast crop before the backbone plant needs the full container. Container 3 holds the root layer. Divide the surface into sections. One section can hold baby carrots, a second can hold beets, a third can hold turnips. If the container is not large enough, choose only 1 or 2. Good succession planning often means planting fewer crop types well. Container 4 holds repeated leafy greens. Sow a short band of arugula, mustard greens, mizuna, or tatsoi. Do not sow all 4 densely in a small pot. Choose 1 or 2, then rotate after harvest. Container 5 holds herbs. Use small interior pots or separate sections for dill and cilantro. Basil remains in the warm bridge if conditions suit it. Stagger dill and cilantro rather than filling the whole container at once. The nursery tray is the future layer. It may contain kale, Swiss chard, tatsoi, or another crop intended to replace the warm bridge. Keep it healthy, but do not start replacements so early that they become root-bound before space opens. Now follow the sequence. The bush beans produce while radishes and arugula grow quickly. Baby carrots and beets develop in the background. Swiss chard or kale becomes established. Dill and cilantro are sown in small amounts. When the warm bridge declines, the nursery crop moves in. When the radishes are harvested, another short sowing begins, or the backbone plant claims the space. This model works on a patio because each container has a role. The containers do not all need to change at the same time. Now, imagine a raised bed. Place the long-term plants where they will not block the entire bed. Kale and Swiss chard can occupy the back or center, depending on the direction of the sun. Leave access for harvesting and pest inspection. Create a root section for carrots, beets, and turnips. Divide it into short rows rather than one large block. Mark every sowing. Use radishes as a temporary marker and quick crop near carrots, but maintain enough spacing to remove them easily. Use the bed edges for arugula, mizuna, mustard greens, or baby tatsoi. Edge crops are easier to harvest and replace. Do not let full-size tatsoi rosettes crowd the path or shade the roots. Reserve the warmest remaining section for bush beans or basil only if the season supports them. Begin the cool season replacement before the warm crop is removed. Dill can stand toward the back where height will not shade the smallest greens. Cilantro can occupy a cooler edge or a separate short row. Again, repeated small sowings are more useful than one dense row. The raised bed sequence may look like this. First, harvest the fast radishes and young arugula. Next, begin taking leaves from mustard, mizuna, Swiss chard, or baby kale. Later, harvest beets, turnips, and baby carrots. Meanwhile, the long-term kale and chard remain in place, and herbs arrive in smaller waves. Avoid the 8 mistakes that collapse this model. Do not sow all 14 crops in one day. Do not empty every seed packet. Do not use one spacing rule for every plant. Do not wait until the bed is completely empty. Do not ignore the first frost date. Do not force cool season seeds into extreme heat without protection. Do not forget labels. And do not grow more of a crop than your household can use. There is one more subtle mistake: replacing a crop too quickly without checking the soil. After removing an old plant, inspect the root zone. If the soil is compacted, loosen only what is necessary. If the container level has dropped, add mature compost or fresh mix. If drainage is poor, correct it before sowing. Succession planting is not simply placing new seed into exhausted conditions. At the same time, avoid overworking the soil after every harvest. Excessive digging can destroy structure and disturb roots of nearby crops. Make targeted improvements. The final plan is much smaller than most people expect. You do not need all 14 crops to begin. You only need the right mix of fast, medium, and long-lasting plants. A useful way to test whether the sequence is balanced is to imagine losing one crop. If the radishes fail, do you still have arugula, mizuna, or mustard greens moving toward harvest? If the cilantro bolts, is dill or basil still available? If a cold night ends the bush beans, are kale or Swiss chard ready to occupy the container? A strong succession plan has overlap without creating excess. That overlap should be intentional. 2 sowings of the same fast crop can overlap for a few days, but they should not be so close that both produce their main harvest together. Slower fall growth can make a 14-day sowing interval behave like a shorter harvest interval because the later planting may grow more slowly. This is why observation matters more than a rigid schedule. Use the size of the first planting as your measuring tool. If one short row of radishes supplied more than the household could use, make the next row shorter. If a small patch of mizuna disappeared from the kitchen in 2 meals, slightly increase the next patch. The correct amount is discovered through use, not through the number of seeds in the packet. The same adjustment applies to harvest style. A family that prefers baby leaves should make smaller, more frequent sowings. A gardener who wants larger rosettes or roots should give each batch more space and more time. One crop name can therefore belong to 2 different succession schedules. Keep paths and access points open. A bed packed so tightly that you cannot reach the center is difficult to inspect, water, thin, and harvest. Leave enough room to see the base of plants, check the undersides of leaves, and remove a finished crop without damaging its replacement. Fertility also needs to match the sequence. Repeated leafy harvests remove nutrients, while root crops can become overly leafy if fed too heavily with nitrogen. Use mature compost and a balanced approach rather than adding strong fertilizer after every harvest. More fertilizer is not a substitute for proper light, water, spacing, or temperature. Mulch is useful around established plants because it slows moisture loss and moderates soil temperature. Keep heavy mulch away from tiny, newly sown rows until seedlings emerge. Small seeds need contact with the soil and must not be buried beneath a thick layer. These details may feel small, but they are what turn a planting list into a functioning garden. The crop choices create potential. The timing, spacing, moisture, and observation create the sequence. For a simple first succession garden, choose 6 crops. Choose 2 fast crops. Radish is a strong first choice. Pair it with arugula or mizuna. These crops create the early harvest and teach you how quickly your local conditions move. Choose 1 root crop. Baby carrot is good for a deeper container. Beet is useful when you want both leaves and roots. Turnip is valuable when the weather is cooling and you want flexibility between greens and roots. Choose 2 backbone crops. Swiss chard and kale are the most dependable pair in this list. They do not need to be planted in large numbers. 1 or 2 healthy plants of each may be enough for a small household. Choose 1 herb according to temperature. Use basil while nights remain warm. Use cilantro as the weather softens. Use dill when you want fresh leaves, flowers, or seed, and have space for its height. Now complete the first action today. Walk through the garden and identify 3 spaces. The first is open now. The second will open soon. The third is permanent space for a backbone plant. In the space open now, sow a small amount of a fast crop. In the space that will open soon, start the replacement in a nursery pot or prepare the seed. In the permanent space, establish kale or Swiss chard. Write the date. This one step turns a collection of plants into a schedule. 7 to 14 days later, evaluate rather than automatically repeat. Did the radishes emerge evenly? Is the arugula growing quickly? Did heat damage the seedbed? Does the household want more of that crop? If the answer is yes, sow another small amount. If not, fix the problem or choose a different crop. When the first fast crop approaches harvest, the second layer should already be visible. That may be a second radish row, a mizuna patch, baby beet leaves, or a young turnip row. When the warm bridge begins to decline, the replacement should already have roots and leaves. Move kale, Swiss chard, tatsoi, or another cool season crop into the opening at the right time. As the season continues, simplify. Do not maintain a crop simply because it appears on a list. If no one in the household eats mustard greens, use more mizuna. If cilantro is essential in your kitchen, maintain 2 or 3 small sowings. If root space is limited, choose beets over carrots. A personal rotation is stronger than a perfect-looking generic plan. The garden, at the beginning of fall, should not look like one giant harvest waiting to happen. It should look uneven in the best possible way. Radishes may be ready while carrots are still small. Arugula may be harvested while tatsoi is forming. Basil may be slowing as cilantro begins. Bush beans may be leaving as kale takes over. Swiss chard may continue through the entire transition. That unevenness is the evidence that the system is working. There will still be gaps. A heat wave may delay germination. A storm may damage seedlings. Insects may take a row. Succession planting does not eliminate risk. It spreads risk. If one sowing fails, another sowing or another crop is already moving behind it. It also spreads labor. Instead of harvesting, washing, cooking, and preserving an overwhelming amount in one weekend, you handle smaller amounts over many weeks. Instead of replanting the entire garden in one exhausting day, you renew a small section at a time. Most importantly, it changes the way you see empty space. A bare patch is not a failure, it is an opening in the sequence. A declining plant is not automatically a disappointment. It may be the signal to prepare the next crop. The 14 crops in this plan each have a different job. Bush beans and basil use remaining warmth. Radishes, arugula, mizuna, mustard greens, and baby tatsoi create quick waves. Baby carrots, beets, and turnips build the middle harvest. Dill and cilantro provide herbs in smaller batches. Swiss, chard, and kale hold the garden together for the longer transition. You do not need to grow all 14, but when you understand their jobs, you can build a rotation that fits almost any small garden. So begin with the smallest useful step. Choose one fast crop, one root crop, one backbone crop, and one herb. Sow only what you can use. Start the replacement before the current crop ends. Record what happens. A productive succession garden is not one where everything is ready at once. It is one where every crop has a replacement already on the way. When one row is harvested, another is growing. When one container slows down, another is beginning. When summer warmth fades, the cool season garden is already present. That is how a small garden keeps producing into fall, not through one enormous planting, but through a calm sequence of well-timed, manageable decisions. Choose your first 3 to 6 crops today, and let the garden tell you when the next wave should begin. If you found this plan useful, share which crop you are planting first and what part of the country you are growing in. And subscribe for the next seasonal garden plan, because the best time to prepare the next harvest is before the current one disappears.